Hello, everybody. It's Susan again, and I'm back with Bukola, and we're going to explore some the mysteries and darker secrets of our experience as humans and our spiritual experiences as well, as we look at the concept of whether evil exists, and if it does, how does that shape us? And there is an understanding from every culture that there is some kind of energy that we could describe as evil. So we're going to explore those notions and hopefully also come up with some solutions in terms of our inner work and the way that we can relate to the world as it's being shaped right now. So Bukola, welcome and welcome back.
I'm excited as usual to be here, Susan. It's a treat every time. I love when our minds come together. And
Yeah.
share with the people.
Yeah,
Cause some conversations to take place.
fantastic. Yeah, really appreciate that. Thanks for coming and taking the time.
It's a joy.
What I really appreciate about you is your capacity to, well, it's coming from your life experience, but the capacity to weave in different understandings from different religions and
Hmm.
cultures as well. So maybe I'll just let you kind of riff on that, the notion of evil in the various different cultures that you've come across and the different
Hmm.
religions that you're experienced with as well.
Well, I've noticed since I was 14 years old, I began my journey as student to many mentors, teachers, scholars, schools of thought, theology, theory, so on and so forth. And the consistency that I've noticed about evil is consent. That's the consistent factor that I'm able to recall is the power of consent when it comes to evil, is that it has to have your consent. And where it gets tricky is where our clarity is at or not, about where our consent is. And so you know, I think that as evil gets characterized in so many different ways, we all can acknowledge that it is there. And there's some things of personal responsibility or lack thereof that, we as the human will blame on evil. But
Yeah.
innate evil, of a different nature, it's certainly something that I think we all have been aware of or could be more aware of today with the way things are looking in the world. But what I'm reminded of is to find and clarify where my consent is at, because that's what I'm going to need when it comes to evil.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because then if we have this notion that there is a kind of an external force called evil, then
Hmm.
and if we don't, like you say, take an inner authority or have a sense of I'm participating in this in some way, then it also throws the question of free will up in the air. So does that mean you're being controlled and you have no choice here? And that's, I think, a place that a lot of people don't want to look at simultaneously because it's so much more convenient to blame, to cast, all of the responsibility on some sort of an entity that is
Right.
evil and that is causing harm or causing us to feel harm. And of course, we're not describing, of course, interhuman relationships where there is violence and there is trauma. That is a different thing here. We're looking at the concept of evil. But
Right.
it's really interesting when you think about it in terms of that the relationship to how I take care of myself, certainly in the Eastern traditions that I'm more familiar with, Buddhism
Hmm.
and Hinduism, there is that concept that the mind is where we find the solution to the attraction to the evil. And
Ah.
in the event of the awakening of the Buddha, so when he became when his original name was Siddhartha Gautama, and he was a prince, and he was trying to find the
Hmm.
key to awakening, and he
Hmm.
became the Buddha, which means the awakened one, through this process of battling with the mind around temptation. So in the Buddhist sort of lore, there is a lord, Mara, who is the lord, sometimes described as the lord of death, but the lord of evil as well, or temptation. He's a
Hmm.
seductor, and evil can tempt us to do things that are going against our own good. And tempting, basically, it boils down to being tempted away from yourself, tempted away from the truth of who we are. And
Mm,
when the Buddha was able to overcome and just constantly push him away, and basically what it boiled down to in the way that it was taught through the tradition is the Buddha would say, I see you, Mara, I see you. And it's
hmm.
acknowledging that and then acting differently that the Buddha was able to attain enlightenment. And in Hinduism, it's the same. The dynamics of the polarities are there as teachers. It's accepted as part of the parcel of being
Ah,
human, that the evil is there and that it's always coming from a place that is to take us away from ourselves. Is that something that you can relate to in terms of what you understand?
so sharply. And when you said as teachers, that's when uh, something very specific comes to mind when you said as teachers. In Ifa Yoruba, African spiritual tradition, there is the Orisha, which is a force of nature um, that really transcends, all uh, traditions, of acknowledging embodiments of forces. Orumila. Orumila is the Orisha of wisdom, in the same way that Thoth, would be considered the same, okay, or Mercury, per se. And of course, there are other um, expressions of Orumila through the sun or Christ. However, Orumila, the spirit of wisdom, he descended from heaven one day, and on the way down in his descent from heaven, he came to heaven to marry, to have children, to work, to experience all of the experiences of the earth life so as to generate that wisdom that it could be shared with humanity when humanity populates the earth. And when that happened, he found that en route to all of these experiences, he ran into evils and antagonism, where I just want to work, but I find, this happens or that happens and there's complications with work. I just want to marry. And I find that when I get there, there's these arguments or troubles or different things. I find that I want to eat, healthy food or good food, and sickness finds me, so on and so forth. So he consulted the oracle called Ifa. And in consulting the oracle explained to him, it said, when you descended from heaven, what is called Elelini, they descended down with you. And that is antagonists or uh, spirits of evil. And he asked and consulted Ifa, and he said, well, how do I address this? How can I, you know, take care of this situation so I don't have to deal with evil? And it was explained to him that you came to earth to bring wisdom. How do you bring wisdom without evil teaching you wisdom?
That's right. It's
Yeah.
absolutely true. There's a British author called C.S. Lewis, and he was a famous author through the 20th century. Um, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is one of his books, and he said he used to be an atheist till he was 32. He was an atheist, and found it really difficult to identify with spiritual practice or God or any notion of that. And then he started to really think differently about it. And then he came to the conclusion that you can't see a straight line unless there's a crooked line to compare it to. And that was a really interesting sort of realization
Oh,
for him.
wow.
There was a sense of good that we carry with us. And what got
Yes.
him away from this notion of there's nothing that is inherently sort of spirit or good that we can identify, and yet what we know we strive for as humans is what is good and right and moral.
Yes.
Even if we're not instructed that way, it just feels better. And then to feel the opposite, we know it's not that. Like there's a almost by definition, evil is the absence of good. It's the absence of love.
Ah, yes, 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 yes.
So it's one of the things that's so striking today, and maybe it's because we're so hyper informed and have so much information at our disposal, is this kind of feeling that it feels like the degree of exposure of evil is increasing, or that there's well, maybe I'll ask it more in a general sense. Do you think evil is on the rise, or is it just being sort of more revealed to us? Is there something that you feel is expanding now?
Well, I'm not convinced that it's necessarily on the rise, but I believe that the veil gets thinner with where we're ascending to.
Right,
So as we ascend in humanity with, passing through the karmic lessons that collectively we're meant to pass through, we vibrate higher. And in vibrating higher, our awareness becomes clearer on what already has been there.
right,
And as we acknowledge it, fear is present because ignorance is there. And fear and ignorance standing in the same place, it can tempt us to give our power away or authorize these evils that already are present to take authority in our life or take authority in our mind and our being. But I believe what is meant for us is to acknowledge what is behind the veil and to see that there are roles for every energy to play.
yeah,
And we all have our consent, our authority. And we're meant to also see how, without these polarized energies, without the absence of light, without the opposites, without the darkness, without the down for the up, we have no depth perception and we have no way to arrive at an appreciation for what is good. And we also may not learn how to fight, without it,
right. Yeah, to stand up for
you
something.
know.
Yeah,
Yes, we have to stand for something,
yeah,
you know. Um, and it's also opportunity for us to experience what love is and what love can accomplish. Because in the face of darkness, in the face of evil, we really get to see the glory of love, you know, and we get to see um, how powerful we are and how unlimited our reach and our capacity is if we can learn how together to connect through love, and I think that evil has to teach us that, or otherwise we could possibly take things for granted.
yeah, yeah. What's interesting, as you touched on earlier, is the universality of this notion of evil and the fact that somehow every culture obviously will use different names and words and maybe even sort of um, depictions of it, but everybody's pretty much on the same page about what is evil in
Yes.
terms of not
Yeah,
necessarily the part,
absolutely.
but the meaning of the energy behind it. So
Absolutely.
it's interesting. I just want to mention for the listener that we're actually recording this just after the lunar eclipse in Pisces, and we did other videos about that that you can listen to specifically about the eclipses themselves. But this is a time post-eclipse period where we're in a kind of a bubble of energy, this kind of inter-eclipse phase, which is quite intense. And as you mentioned, this kind of thinning of a veil of awareness, and especially in Pisces, and especially around the moon on the North Node, where there's so much more of a heightened capacity for spiritual awareness or an awakening, but there's an equal capacity for self-delusion and not being clear. And,
Uh-huh.
and so that's something that I also I've been thinking about lately is in terms of how you mentioned that we need to be in agreement, or there has to be some participation on our behalf when evil is involved, or when there's an enticement or a seduction towards that. We have to somehow use our free will and choose. to go in that direction and keep choosing and keep choosing. And a lot of that can come through that delusion that I will find happiness through doing this other thing. And the very interesting thing about even the notion of evil doing or being in an energy of wrongdoing or evil is that the ultimate goal is always, I want to feel better. I want to feel good. I want to have pleasure. And it's just really coming through a means that is either uh, a distortion of the mind or a distortion of a perversion of the desire, or
Hmm.
it's coming through a distortion of the emotion, which is, I'm angry and my anger will stop when you're not there anymore, for example. And this
Hmm.
in this sort of extreme way. So it's still kind of interesting to feel in terms of that the energy dynamic of the going towards spirit, going towards the light, going towards something bigger, but the trap of the illusion, delusion, or seduction that can be always there on the way. And in the Indian tradition, they always say when someone has gone through a process of enlightenment and they're at their sort of what they might be described as peak of awareness, peak enlightenment, they are most vulnerable. That's when they're most vulnerable to the so-called evil forces or the corrupting forces, the seduction. And that's often where you find throughout generations, you found, especially now in the Kali Yuga, you find these teachers who fall from high pedestals because they get to this point where um, the temptation is never gone, and there's an egoic foundation that hasn't exhausted itself somehow. So to be fully enlightened in our time in the Kali Yuga is a really arduous task. It's really difficult because of this constant state of disruption and enticement and seduction. So I just wanted to keep that thought of we're in this period of the eclipse and the energy of approaching our spirit, approaching a higher vision is always very fragile. It's never a complete job. It always requires a certain polishing and a vigilance. In the Buddhist approach, it's about, they call it polishing the mirror, always looking and polishing the mirror. And
Oh wow. You know, I had a teacher who told me the same thing. I remember I was just 20 years old and I was a custodian of the masjid. And my teacher, he's from Egypt, and he speaks with a really heavy accent. Uh, we would fast every day from sun up to sundown, and in the evenings we would sit together, and we would eat from the same dish. And as we were sitting and eating, he rubbed on his beard and he said, I have a gift for you. I said, you have a gift for me? I got grease all over my fingers, and I'm like, okay, let me wipe my hands, what's the gift? So he said, I have a special gift for you. And he said, the gift is nasiha. And I said, nasiha, okay. And nasiha, is Arabic word for advice or admonition. And he said, do you watch your heart? And I said, watch my heart. And he said, Aniya fil qalbi. And Aniya fil qalbi, it means the intention is in the heart.
aha.
And so, yes, the intention is in the heart. And he said, do you remember that the heart, it has two meanings that sound alike, like a pun is what he was suggesting. He was trying to say pun, but I guess he didn't know the word, for pun. But he said qalb and, qalab, it's like boiling water and heart.
Oh, wow.
It, it's the same, it's the same expression or same sound. And he said, now, he said, with that, with me saying that, he said, listen to me. He said there's a concept is called muraqaba. Muraqaba. Mu is, it's a pretext for someone who does a thing, like mu'adhan, person who calls the adhan, mu'ahmed, the person who praises, and muraqaba is a person who does surveillance of the heart. And he said, you see like the camera. And I said, yes, the camera. He pointed at the camera. He said, you see the camera outside the masjid. I said, yeah, the camera outside the masjid. He said, you see it, you see it, you see it. Okay, you see your heart. You see every moment. You see it, you see it, you see it. And he taught me that concept. Um, and where I heard that similar was with my oldest brother. And my oldest brother, he's a Marine Corps sniper. He went to Mogadishu, Somalia. He was a martial artist as well. And when I was younger, he would, teach me martial arts before he left to the Marine Corps. I was his punching bag pretty much. And so he taught me a concept. It's called Mushin, Kopurayu Jitsu. And Mushin, like when you go into an environment, you surveillance the environment and you anticipate all of the possibilities of what could take place in the environment. And you position yourself according to that possibility, like bagging your car, I guess. And so this surveillance of the heart, the self-awareness, it shows that certain faculties that we have, it's intended possibly for higher purposes than what we can sometimes misuse it for. Like the South Node Virgo, for example, it wants to check everything 20 times over, straighten everything, look it over OCD. But that same energy can be repurposed for examining the heart, monitoring the heart. And just like you said with Pisces, there's an awareness that people are tapping into, and it could take you up or it could take you down. Because really what it shows is that it's access. You've gained access to a realm that you could either get lost in or you can redeem yourself through. And I think what I'm saying in all of that to come, full circle is the compassion that we owe to people who may be suffering from, addictions, depression, even anger, things of that nature. We all are becoming more aware of what has already been there all along. And we don't always know how to respond or what to do with it,
Right.
and we could easily practice that Pisces escapism and find ourselves answering to it in ways that probably wasn't meant for us to answer it in those lower frequencies. So I think what you're really showing is the responsibility that we have to that energy is to monitor our hearts.
Yeah, that's a beautiful expression as well. I like that because it's really
Yeah.
that physicality. It's a combination of a deep knowing that is coming from the heart, which is another in the Eastern tradition, the heart is considered the seat of the mind, actually, rather than the brain. Even when we speak about ourselves, we bring our hand to the heart. This is me, and it's either that sense of the deep knowing or it's a physicality that we sense when something is wrong and things are off. The heart is not right. The heart is either tight or it's beating faster or it's heavy. There's all these physicalities with ways that we can physically relate to the experience of the heart center that is the guide, basically. And if we're paying attention to that rather than the mental chatter, we really do have the guidance that we require. It's all there. Um,
Oh,
there's
wow.
there's a concept in the energy body concept of Indian sort of yoga and Ayurvedic concepts, which is that there is the physical heart, which is Hrid, the heart as itself. But then there is also, so when we have the chakra around the heart, the fourth chakra is called Anahata, which means the unstruck sound. It's the sound that occurs without anything coming up against it to make the sound. It's inherent in us. It's a kind of a life force, the drum of life, which is also depicted when we see Shiva with the drum, the Dumru, he's beating the heart of the universe.
Mm.
And that's our physical heart, but it's also in the Hridaya, the Hrid meaning heart, but in the more like the cave of the heart. The Hridaya is another energy center that is bigger than the physical heart. And it's more where we keep our awareness, this instinctive, intuitive awareness of what is self, what is other, what is right, what is wrong, what is up and down. And that is where we get distracted when the senses are drawn out, when we're looking at seductive images or hearing seductive sounds and all of the chaos that is actually physiologically as well as psychologically disrupting. It takes
Noise.
away
Yeah.
from the surveillance of the heart, basically.
Uh-huh. Noise. Yeah, noise. You just you gave a great explanation possibly of the South Node Virgo uh Sun and Mercury transit.
Ah, wow. Yeah, interesting. I never thought about it that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfection.
Yeah, and that
Yes.
this is the cosmic joke on Virgo is that everything is already perfect, right? And it's only the mind
Right.
that keeps assessing something out of balance or something flawed. And
You're right. Yes.
yeah. And
Yes.
it's interesting in the concept of, again, if we come back to the energy body in the Indian tradition, the concept of the fifth chakra, which is the energy center of the throat, it represents purification. It's known as Vishuddha or Vishuddhi, which means to purify, to cleanse. And
Interesting.
it is
Consider with Taurus
uh,
and the
there.
action bio.
Right. I don't know
Yeah,
about that. There's different systems say different things about the signs. So I don't
beautiful.
adhere too strongly to one or another. I think that can be a little bit flexible.
I
Um,
see.
but the fifth chakra choice point, it's how we choose, how we discern and make choice. It is actually between the heart and the mind. So it involves both. We need the discernment and we need the heart. And then we can make the choice.
Between the heart and the mind.
Yeah. And so that's only when we combine those points can we come to clarity around how we speak, how we choose, how we discern. And so that's part of the Virgo sort of shadow is going too much towards the mind and too much towards the seeing the flaws or the imperfections or the judgment and criticism of what might be there, which can be helpful under certain circumstances in certain limited ways. But the imperfection or the flaw, the shadow of Pisces, is being far too much in the heart or in the ether and not sufficiently in the mind or grounding with discernment and the two balance each other out. And so when the polarity is maintained, when there's a remembrance that here we have to live through this mysterious heart center that is actually more related to instinct and more related to what is our moral compass. And then we use the mind to discern the action that is required, what to do about this, how to speak about this, how to choose that. That's the Mercury aspect of that. Then we can come to a place where we're polishing the mirror, as you say, or surveilling the heart, but being able to take action based on that as well. Uh,
Mhm.
and this is, I think, a really interesting place to put this in the broader context of the astrology, maybe, where we can have a look at the bigger impact of these shifts that we're heading into in the next few years. For me, I feel like the next 5 years, 7 years, especially with Uranus in Gemini, will be really tumultuous, and I think it'll start to taper off. But we've got probably a good decade of real stripping away of things that can lead to human pain and suffering and disruption in what we knew, what we thought we could rely on in quite a big way. And that's why I think we're at a very vulnerable kind of a knife's edge where we're more vulnerable to the influence of evil and we're more
Yes.
vulnerable than to being provoked. And you mentioned the word fear earlier,
Yeah.
being provoked to do something harmful. even to ourselves or to others, especially. So we're looking at a precarious moment in time because there's so much change and so little to be relied upon. If we come into ourselves, this is the place that we can rely upon our intuition and our knowing. I know this is right. I know this is what I feel. This is not coming from an imbalance of energy, which anger feels very different. Anger feels very different from that place of knowing. I'm at peace with what I know here. Um,
Yes.
right.
It makes me curious that um, looking at the Cancer Jupiter, expansion that we have going on, and also the fact that Venus is exalted um, in Pisces. When it comes to fear and what so many people are suffering through, the shadow, as you mentioned, of Pisces, um, love is the appropriate solution, for fear, other than, of course, knowledge and awareness.
Yeah.
Um, the expansion of love to address fears or to endure the discovery of what we need to know and understand through those fears. And I'm really convinced that this is a time where we are learning to become brave enough and authentic enough to love,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that will diminish, destroy so much fear that's in the atmosphere. We as a people have for so long been subjected to people who have been abusing power and wealth and control, and to keep us, the people, from rejecting or rebelling, since the days of Napoleon. It's like that was the last straw. We're going to get together like the secret treaty of Verona, and we're going to come down on this 1822, I believe that was. We can't have the people rebelling anymore. Um, Love is a bravery that laughs in the face of death.
Absolutely.
And
We talk about courage, right? That's
man,
from the root word of the heart, the meaning the le cœur, that's the heart.
yes, you know, with love, we are a force to be reckoned with. The people, we're a force to be reckoned with.
And I think this is also what you were getting at in terms of the what was in the atmosphere. You alluded to that. You know the concept of egregore, this concept of an energy that is intangible but is there. You can find that in like office culture, or you find that in a town. You have a city and it has a vibe.
Oh
That's
yeah, like when my grandmother would say, you could cut that you could cut that energy with a butter knife.
exactly that. So we know that there's something
Yeah.
that exists, but it's not tangible, and that,
Yes.
that has a name, and it's called an egregore. And so that energy is there. It's an energy field, and we can either feed it and nourish it, or we can feed a different energy, and we can ideally ignore that sort of angry, violent, fearful energy, of course, keeping an eye on it, with
Hmm.
but then focus on where am I physically in my heart space? Where am I in my mind and my intentions? And how am I interacting day by day with people? And recognizing that there is something that is an accumulated energy of consciousness that is generated by people sharing the same heart energy. So when the heart is out of whack, when it's not in its alignment, when people are feeling disgruntled or angry or betrayed, and all of the other ways that the heart can feel so entangled in anger and resentment and fear, we need to make it more clear to everyone that that's where the answer is. It's where the problem is, and it's where the solution is. so that as much as
It's like
possible.
emitting into the atmosphere.
Yeah, because we're
Yeah,
also able to conduct ourselves in our energy field, or we could describe that as an aura. And our aura is also what people are aware of. Like they say, and studies have shown when they show video, surveillance video of people walking down urban streets, and they show that to criminals, and they say, which one of these people would you mug? Which one of these people's handbags would you steal? And without exception, each of them chooses the same person because that person has an energy about them in the way that they hold their body, in the way they walk,
absolutely.
and that
Yes.
resonating with anxiety and fear,
Yeah.
with a preoccupation that is mental. They're not in their body. They're not aware of their space. You mentioned your brother who comes in and surveils and knows what's going on. I know the space. I know what's around me before
Right.
starting to take action. And every single one of those criminals was saying, I know exactly who I would take first, that one, that one. And everybody said the same person because there is such an energy about us. And when we then expand that into a group and an urban environment, a collective, a bigger energetic volume, let's say, of energy, then we are creating this notion of this egregore, this feeling of this vibe that is there. And that's what we can work on, but the work that we do is individual. The focus is coming from within ourselves. And
That's fact.
that's
That,
where
that's
I find
that's
that the
fascinating.
Jupiter in Cancer, for the moment, it just to wrap this up, the Jupiter in Cancer is it's our support animal. It's giving us the feeling of abundance and possibility and hope and nourishment and expansion that we can draw on, that we can actually use in a conscious way to say, I know I need to nourish myself. I'm coming home. Cancer is all about the stomach and the gut and Cancer and Leo share the heart anatomically in astrology. So Cancer shares the heart as an emotional space,
Yes.
nurturing space, and Leo shares the heart as the courageous and loving space.
Yeah.
Um, the one that projects an aspect of self through joy and so on. And both
Yeah.
relate to the emotions, but Cancer is more in terms of the nurturing factor, and Leo is more of the external, the yang kind of energy that we can use of the heart.
Right. Right. And see, as you were speaking about that, um, it raises a curious question. Does our own energy field also attract the lessons that we need to manage to bring awareness to how we should manage that energy field?
Oh, that's a good question.
You know, like it's kind of like when I was younger and I was in a rough neighborhood where it was always something. You at the school or around the neighborhood, it's like I here we go again. It might be a fight today,
All right.
or one of those. And so when you when you get to have more mobility, you move around, you become more aware of yourself as you travel and experience different things. You learn to pay attention to yourself, so on and so forth. At some point, you may come to the realization that your energy field could be attracting these teachers that seem like antagonists or people that just want to get on your nerves, you
Right.
know? And, you know, um, is it something about me that I'm emitting? Is it something about my demeanor, my body language, or the like as you said, the energy field of the heart that I'm putting out that's attracting, to me specific experiences.
Yeah.
And perhaps I need those experiences to become deeply aware of where, it's coming from or how to balance it.
Yeah.
it that
Absolutely.
that's it's amazing. I really appreciate the way you explain that. It really makes me think about that.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, this is my Pisces stellium speaking. I feel like all of life is a lesson, and then that it's, of course, that can be very abstract and theoretical and all by very sort of idealistic. But I feel like everything that happens to us can be best used as a lesson. And when we stay stuck on the event and the pain of it, and it's not about bypassing, it's not about spiritual bypassing and saying it's all fine, it'll all be fine. It's recognizing that there was a karma that took us from point A to point B to point C to point D, and it all is part of this bigger journey. And we didn't start off in point A intending to have this event at, G or F or whatever, but we got there. And that's all part of learning that every choice, and that's where we come back to that energy body concept and the notion of keeping your heart under surveillance. Every choice that we're making is taking us in a direction that is going to have more likelihood, let's say, of encounters in a way, whether it's with other people or with health incidents or with whatever event, that
Yeah.
these are parts of who we are in this lifetime and how we make our choices that also depend on our surroundings and our culture and the time that we're alive in. We're alive now in 2025, and our ancestors alive hundreds of years ago had a different atmosphere, a different modeling of society, and so therefore different influences at play. But it was their karma, it was their way of navigating through life. So I think that is, anyway, it's not necessarily how everyone is managing to cope, but I feel that it's most helpful if we see everything like that as a lesson. What is the lesson here for me? And
Yes.
when we
Lesson.
when we look outward at the so-called enemy, the person who is the antagonist or the problem or the thing that happened as this mighty weight that we have to kind of carry with us, or as that's also the Virgo and Pisces notion. We spoke about that in our very first conversation in August of 2024, and we talked about that notion of the victim martyr dynamic that can be really strong,
Yeah.
and that we have to choose, where are we on this? Do I want to be in? And there are, of course, absolute victims. If somebody gets mugged or beaten up, that's a victim of that moment. But then if we expand the scope, we say, well, how did that person involve themselves in that moment? How did they get to this moment? And
Mm.
then start to recognize, well, they made a choice about which street to walk down, or they made a choice about which attitude to carry, or what they were going to entangle themselves with. And again, some of these choices are unconscious and karmic that we don't actually have in the moment a conscious awareness of, I'm doing this for this result, but it's the setup of this lifetime, and we can see in many people's lives, as you do through your astrology and looking at people's charts, and as I do,
Right.
you can see that there's a tendency that someone can carry towards conflict, but it's already inherited, so it's already there. And so that becomes where it becomes even more important to recognize ourselves and where we are in the moment so that we can stop and examine the cycle that we're born into, examine the culture we're born into, examine the religion even, or the family and the context that we're born into, and keep making those choices. Do I want this? Is this what I want? And all great spiritual leaders throughout time have all had to pick up their bed and walk. They've all had to move themselves where they needed to be able to encounter themselves more purely, sometimes leaving loved ones, like an example again through the Buddha, but there are many, many like that, and having to walk in a way that is uniquely their space, their energy that they're recreating in every moment of awareness, and avoiding the entanglement.
Wow. Susan, I don't know if you realize it or not, but when you discourse, you're pulling. I can see Pisces so clearly because what I really want to say this because I'm sure that the people out there, they're going to attest to this, is that um, what I'm getting while I'm listening to you is I'm getting all that is behind form, all that is behind what has representation and form. And it helps us to get at where the responsibility begins at.
Right.
that's that's really effective. Um,
It's definitely also Pisces, and Pisces in our, in the way that we look at astrological Pisces, it represents Christ, it represents Shiva.
Absolutely, yes, yes, yes. Christ simple.
Yeah, go beyond all of this nonsense, go beyond all of that stuff and see what is true and real. And that's the notion of consciousness, the energy field. This is the big question of what is consciousness that is actually imbibing everything that is in everything, and that we are participating in as opposed to possessing. We don't have a consciousness
Right,
in consciousness. And as much as people can remember that, then they will also be able to navigate in the field of wherever they are in a way that is guiding them towards more of that, more of themselves and the self-awareness that consciousness can bring. Um,
Fanta-
so
fantastic.
these
Th- th-
times, the energetic times that we're in, can be extremely sort of fast in terms of our sense of time, which is, of course, a complete fabrication, and it's just a human concept. I hear a lot of people talking about things like shifting timelines, and I'm just going to get on a soapbox here and rant for a minute.
oh,
With
please, will do. Yeah, let it flow.
there is, there is because time is useful in a practical sense, like I'm going to have a timeline to use this, develop this project. So Monday I start my work, Wednesday I'm going to have a meeting about it,
Yeah,
Thursday we're going to show,
Virgo.
next Tuesday we're going to have a presentation about it, next Friday it's done, right? That's a time.
Right,
But when we're talking about an energetic timeline, there is no such thing. And this is what is important because we get entangled in the spiritual concepts, but applying dualistic notions to them or the concrete material 3D notions to them. And it always has the effect of people putting themselves in a place of other, as opposed to recognizing that we're all participating in it all the time. So there's no timeline that existed that now becomes a new timeline. And this is often how people have been describing things like eclipses, shifting timelines and stuff. It drives me nuts because it implies that to get to some spiritual place, you have to go from one mental concept to another mental concept. But the whole point of the spiritual place is that we have to move beyond the concepts, the mental concepts, and the frame of reference that we're using, because it's obviously taking us down the wrong road. And that one of those concepts is identity. In the notion in Buddhism, we have this concept of not ascribing to a superior, or what is called a superiority complex, or an inferiority complex, or the complex of equality. And the reason is because each of those keeps us in a cage of identification. I am this. This is me in reference to. And we have to keep
and
remembering
competition lurks around the corner.
it always. And so it's a trap, actually. And it's a trap. It's like I'm so egalitarian. So
That
that's your
that
trap.
jealousy and envy, comparison.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's why these
yeah,
things are sins, right? These are sins
right.
in every spiritual tradition. I'm
Yes,
not sure where I'm going with this, but anyway, the point was that just basically we have to come beyond all of those notions of self-identification, and then when we take away from that self-identification, we can also strip away the notion that what happened around us or to us or through us is wrong, or it shouldn't have happened. And then when we come back to that place of, okay, it's all stuff that I'm participating in, like you mentioned from the beginning, we have to consent to the notion of evil. We have to in some way or another, we have to participate in that. And then it allows us to see, well, actually, there's no me to have suffered this. And when you get to that point, you move in such a instantaneous way. You move beyond.
have suffered this. Oh, what a jewel! What
Yeah.
a jewel!
It's
What?
really, I think the Pisces Virgo axis kind of is that. It is all
Yeah,
about overcoming this bigger life question.
wow, absolutely. It's the fine balance between uh density and fluidity.
Yeah, and
The
can we move like water, or moving like I always think of Bruce Lee when I say that when
That's
move
exactly
like
what I
water
thought about. Yes.
around things. Water is incredibly
Yeah.
tolerant, but at the same time, water fills all levels, and it comes to a level. Whatever depth, if you look at whatever plumbed depth you can find in the sea, the surface of the sea is roughly the same level. And that's where then Virgo, on the opposite end of that, is focused more on the different layers or the depths, and not seeing the bigger leveling off, as it were. Too much of the focus that in that mercurial way, which wants to categorize and label things, which again is super important on a day-to-day level and on a discernment level, but it takes us away from ourself when we go too far into that.
Yes. And there's also a rigid limitation behind that, in needing so much control through information or management in order to feel content or to experience a sense of acceptance. And we could be learning to co-create, with the forces of this universe rather than subject everything to our limited capacities.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. And yeah, because our capacities are always a product of where we are from, right? It's always like some Arabic, and having that understanding of the way that even the language describes things in a different way, and
Oh,
it makes the person relate to life in a different way. And the English and Germanic languages, particularly, even to a certain extent, I guess the Latin languages, they are very ego-centered, very individual, ego-centered. I identify myself. And if you go towards the sort of, Farsi, Arabic, and all the sort of Central Asian languages, and even
hmm.
Urdu or Hindi, you have languages that are group-centric. And that filters through a collective experience rather than a unique individual experience. And it creates a different worldview.
Ah, I see. I see. I see.
I wanted to come back to this mini grand trine because I'm curious to see how you see that evolving over the years coming. What is your way of understanding this shift that is big, 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 big shift in our times, and how we're going to relate to that?
Well, what I'm what I see is that we are at um, as it relates to the air trine and the water trine. What I'm seeing is that our emotional clarity is what gives us access to the mental clarity that allows us to be present with the opportunities that are initiating for us. So I see a strong emphasis on the water points for us to get it together with our emotional state and surrender much of what we feel we need earthly control of. So it's like coming out of the rigid earth fixation of the past timeline, trusting ourselves to become more fluid in our emotional state and accepting without losing the accountability, and opening up in the ethereal to comprehend the opportunities in that space of clarity and surrender. The opportunities could be in the space of serenity and surrender, not in what we feel we have to have so much control of. Because the gift is that we are co creating with an intention over us. There's an active intention over us that wants us to succeed and prosper and to be well. And if we could realize that and trust that, then we know that justifying surrender can be more realistic to us, and we can realize how where we already are and what already is manifest could be more than what we need to make a beginning. That restores all that confidence.
Right.
So, we're trying to find, where do I go from here? I think we all feel the two worlds split, where I remembered myself as this, and now I'm becoming aware of myself as this. But where does it fit in what I'm used to relating to as my lifestyle, or intention? You know?
Right. And so this is where the evil question comes in.
Uh-huh.
If I, if so, I agree with you on that, that we really are going into a completely, it's an opportunity to move into a completely different space collectively and more.
Imagine Pasonia. Oh, wow. It's exciting.
It's exciting. It's
Yeah.
exciting. So then there's still this lurking question of very powerful people in the world, very powerful forces, which don't see that, don't live through that, and yet they have enormous influence over us collectively. And
Yep.
so this will be a situation where there's an enormous amount of quite rapidly economic strife and unemployment and difficulties that people are going to have in the sort of real life difficulties coming very, very soon. And here well, I'm currently in Toronto, but in Europe, governments and economies are collapsing in slow motion. But then, that slowness it accelerates to the point of the actual collapse, which comes quickly. And so there's the two things colliding quite literally, like you described, this splitting of the worlds, but they collide at a certain point. And so,
Hmm.
what would you say in terms of how we navigate that, how we go through that transformation, what to take with us, what to leave behind?
What I see is that it's going to take us to admit to ourselves that the concepts that we have of life and of the world was given to us. We didn't give ourselves the chance to arrive to the proper concept or the realization because of the controls over us. And we have to look at the current time as an opportunity that is really a provision for us. The provision is these forces that are aligning in the heavens, they are adjusted and calibrated for our benefit and not against us or for our misfortune. It is for our benefit. And if we can find the acceptance for what it requires of us, we have immunity. Because those who are trying to keep hold of power and control and trying to make this earthy, Ahrimanic energy to last in their grip, they don't stand a chance against the powers that are for us, the people. They don't stand a chance. But we have to be the ones who become loving and lovable enough, receptive enough, and seeing through these illusions at what is real, which could mean dealing with disillusionment, cognitive dissonance, the discomfort, or even the pains of accepting that what we thought was true, what we thought was right, what we thought even was good, the sentiment that we placed on symbols and things and names, we may have to let go of all of these forms, these earthy things. The planets are coming out of the earth and into the air.
Right.
So our way forward is not in the things that we covet, the symbols and the establishments, the flags, the status. all these symbols that give us, that's loaded with emotional sentiment that causes us to have these knee-jerk reactions every time. That's how they keep controlling us. If I know you like if I know you like this particular symbol that makes you feel all goosey inside, then I'm going to hide my agenda inside of that symbol, because I know if I show it, you're going to get all goosey and you're going to get blind to who's behind it, you
Right.
know? So we've got to let go of our attachment to these things that we put so much sentiment and reverence into, that does not transfer spiritual value or power. The spiritual value and power is in the self, not in the things that we see in the earth that we have reverenced for so long. That's how they keep getting us,
Right. That's brilliant. Yeah, that's
you
that.
know, and the provocation of fear. Because with that Cancer Jupiter expanding, it's helping us to reclaim our moral compass, our moral commitment, and our identity with the matriarchal, core, the living essence of ourself, the matriarchal, which, do no harm to self, do no harm to others,
Yeah,
have compassion, have empathy, care for your neighbor, so on and so forth. These are the basics that makes life worth living.
absolutely.
And, when we recover that, and when that part becomes bigger to us than the fear that they tried to provoke us with, they no longer can control us. The remote control doesn't work anymore. You know how you got the remote control, the battery's dead, and you move in your hand and you jolt in your hand to turn the channel. Like, this thing don't work. It won't work anymore, because we're too committed to our humanity. We're too committed to who we realize we really are through all of these illusions that they want to train us to be. These people, or these beings, whatever they are, okay, uh, behind their mask, um, fear is how they get around your consent. You
Yeah,
know, when they want to do something that we know is morally, a, a moral objection, or something that we just aren't going to stand for, they go into the shed and they bring out a jar of fear. They shake it up and spew hysteria and terror into the atmosphere, in order to say, see, I told you we need to go and do this. So since you're scared, we're going to be the hero that comes and save you from what I just got done doing to you.
right.
You know? So it's like the car mechanic that, that breaks your starter and tells you need a new starter.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we're still not catching on to that. We're still not seeing it.
Yeah. I mean, you just basically described a business model, isn't it? It's a business model and
Yeah,
it's not
the
a model of
business model
humanity. Yeah.
works every time.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Yeah, and it's what's really interesting there about that is that the way to get people to fear, in whatever way, is to dehumanize another human, another person, another group or society, and that is the first clue that we're dealing with something that is approaching evil. That when your fear is based on othering some group and putting millions of people in the same box, millions of people or even billions of people in the same collective category, we're not dealing with rational human heart-based thinking. We're dealing with something that is approaching evil. And it's only because of that evil influence and the dehumanization of the other that it's easier to commit evil. There's a channel called The Memory Hole. You find some really interesting videos posted on The Memory Hole. It's on YouTube, it's on Substack, and so on. And the memory hole pulls up videos of things that are really important to us to understand now. So it's things from, all kinds of decades ago that might be for example, related to MK Ultra, or it might be related to some government shenanigans from decades ago. It's not entirely American, but it's mostly American focused. And recently there was a video of a German war vet from the First World War, I think. It was a very old interview that was done with him, and he was talking about his encounter with a French soldier, and he recognized that he had to kill this French soldier. They were looking each other in the eye because the French soldier wanted to kill him too. And yet he also understood that neither of them wanted to kill each other. And their
Wow.
training as soldiers, he said in the training, they taught us not to look at your opponent as human. As soon as you look at your opponent as human, you won't be able to do the job. And to be a good soldier, you have to look at your opponent as not
Wow.
human. And that's the literal training that they're getting. And that's certainly the training that we get collectively in some
I
ways.
was Yes, that's the training we're getting collectively. Yes.
And
Losing sight of the humanity in the other person.
yeah. So that
A-
urgency of coming
a-
back each time to
Ash,
question.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's this.
That,
Am I looking at this as a human, from human to human, or is this part of this more transhuman energy that we're picking up on, which is making it easier to do mass killings because it's drones doing the killing, or it's some guy that thinks he's playing a video game thousands of kilometers away doing the killing, and it doesn't affect him because he's not looking that person in the eye. He's not identifying with that as a human being. Um, and this is the again coming back full circle to the feeling in my heart. What does my heart tell me? And of course, we're in a world where, and of course that's part of the Kali Yuga as well, where there's constant war. This is one of the ways of identifying Kali Yuga is that we're in a perpetual state of war, and understanding that that's part of it. The in the same scripture that talks about the conditions of Kali Yuga, the cheating, the dishonesty, the warring, and the just general greediness that is part of the identification of the era, is that this is also the most auspicious time to practice spiritual awakening and to get to that point where you realize the truth of life, because it's the rewards are even greater in this kind of conditioning, in this kind of environment.
mm, wow. And someone has to um someone has to be a beacon of light in every space. If we're in a space where it seems there is no light, we do have the option to become that light.
Absolutely. Absolutely true. That was, I can't remember who said that. It's a woman, I can't remember her name though. And she said, if you're looking around and all you're seeing is darkness, then it's maybe because you're the light. And that's a really beautiful way of looking at it. Rather than looking outwards and seeing only the darkness, look inwards and say, well, I have the light. I can be the light in this very dark environment, this dark
Uh,
situation.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, on that note, I want to mention that you are also the light for people that you do readings for, and that you do all kinds of astrology sessions for people. You upload incredible videos about concepts that people are grappling with. Recently you were talking about the what basically what we're talking about here, this kind of testing of our times and the difficulty.
Sure. Yes.
So I invite people to go to your channel, and if they want to get a reading from you, which I highly recommend, where would they go?
You can go to www.the hyphen infamous hyphen astrologist .com. You can also go to my YouTube channel, The Infamous Astrologist. Check me out on there if you want to listen to something there and receive what you can or want to. Leave me a note or comment, and I can catch you there as well. I welcome everybody. We're one big community. From myself to Susan. We're neighbors out here, and every person that I get to work with behind the scenes, including you, Susan, every person is a source of inspiration for me. Uh, every person is someone that I can step back and really admire at, who they are and what they come to Earth to do. So I'm always looking forward to, working with whoever I can behind the scenes as well. That's where the magic really happens at, you
That is
know,
true.
you
Yeah,
know,
it's very, very
beautiful thing.
beautiful. Yeah, I can honestly say it's a beautiful reading. You really see your light through the sessions that you have with
I'm
book.
thankful for that. I am thankful.
Really, really beautiful. So thank you again for being here. We'll be back and we'll find other tackle subjects to tackle.
Yeah,
And
it's always great, Susan. It's always great. I love when you channel. It's like I'm sitting by the water and all the, the fancy fish, the colorful fish start jumping out, That Pisces stallion really speaks to you. It does. You channel from source. You really do. Oh man, it's
oh,
rich every time.
thanks very much. Okay, lots of love to you, and I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, take care. Peace and love.
Bye bye.